Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. It's Thursday, and you know what that means. Venus Unplugged, your virtual Heartbreak Hotel. This is your hostess, Llorraine Neithardt. And what we do here at this Heartbreak Hotel is we explore all things Venusian. This month, and may last 6 weeks, I think, we're going to work on the fairy tale of Snow White, which is a teaching tale. It's actually, fairy tales usually deal more with the feminine. Religions deal more with the masculine. A lot of their images have to do with the male teachings, where in fairy tales it's encoded with the feminine's development, both in the male and in the female. So we have this amazing tale about Snow White, and not the Walt Disney kind, the real one. So we're going to just start with this. Let's hear. Once upon a time, in the middle of winter, snowflakes were falling like feathers from heaven. A queen was sitting at a window that had a frame of black ebony, and she was sewing. And as she sewed and looked up at the snow, she pricked her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of blood fell in the snow. Because the red against the white snow looked so beautiful, she thought to herself, if only I had a child whose skin was as white as snow, whose cheeks and lips were as red as blood, and whose hair was as black as the ebony wood of the window frame. Soon after, she gave birth to a daughter whose skin was as white as snow, whose cheeks and lips were as red as blood, and whose hair was as black as ebony wood, and thus she called her Snow White. But when the child was born, the queen died. That's some paragraph. So what we're going to go over here is how does psyche, operate? What is her coding when we have a dream or a fairy tale? The unconscious knows what it's referring to, but, our job is to make things conscious, to make our life conscious, because then we know what we're up to, okay? And even if we make up a fairy tale, because sometimes when a person tells me a story, their life story, which is always astounding and filled with rich symbolism, but they think it's nothing, and I just say, write a fairy tale to your inner kid. Let's see. And there it all is, the whole can of beans. It's just released. Symbolically. Because, that's part of why the culture is going to hell in a handbasket. We need to work more on the symbolisms. Not the meaning we want it to be, but the meaning that it is. How does psyche, how does soul, what is it hinting at? I mean, we all are in the midst of a great mystery, a profound mystery. Part of the story of Snow White, it's a teaching mystery about the awakening of the soul, a slumbering soul. So here we have, this queen, this lonely queen. So in fairy tales, and also in fairy tales or in dreams or in life, pay attention to the details. Don't get neurotic and don't get caught up on them. But why 3 drops of blood and not a pint? Okay, what's going? In a fairy tale, anything like this, or mythology, when they give that slight detail, which most people just skip by, it's like you're going to have to go back and look at that. Why did the horse go left and right? What is this? Because you're walking into a realm. It's a fairy tale to psyche is what numbers are to a physicist. That's how profound and moving and exciting and interesting your psyche is. It's awesome. You may be asleep to it, But if you are, you're suffering on some level, or you're in an addiction, or something's going on. So let's go on here. So in the fairy tale, kings and queens often are old and feeble and about to die or doomed to death in some form, okay? And it represents the old order that must die, and the hero or the heroine must be chosen and accept the unknown task of transformation. Now, with Snow White, as soon as we see the number 3, as soon as we see the 3 colors of the goddess, the red, black, and white, dun, 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 we're talking feminine transformation. We're talking initiation. We're talking like, whoa, this isn't always going to end well, okay? But it's worth the journey. What the heck, you know? So in Snow White, the masculine principle and the children, which come in, you know, there's no father. He shows up kind of for a moment. And of course the prince shows up a little later. And there are the 7 dwarfs, but actually, you know, in the Disney version, the dwarfs are named. In fairy tales, they're not named. And that it's legend that dwarfs have no parents and have no children. So that's always very interesting. Don't always listen to Disney. He was doing a lot of drugs at the time, and that was what he was up to. Okay, so here we have. So in Snow White, the masculine principle and the children are, they're not around. She's the only one, and an only child on top of it. And the vision and the path of the future are absent. The mother's just sitting there. So the image of the lonely queen intensifies that her life is cold and has become one-sided. Perhaps this is an imprint of the complexity or an inferiority complex. When we're feeling very one-sided, we can't see the other side. You know, or it's like when you're trying to teach children. Okay, tell me your story, then let's hear their story. And then they start to hear these 2 stories and what's going on, mirroring opposites. Where are the opposites being built up here? So you get this sense of this queen sitting there. It's cold. The scene is cold. The scene is in the middle of winter. So what's that? It's the solstice. That's when we're going to go into an initiation process. That's when we go into the depth of the winter, our hibernation. We want to sleep more. We want to dream more. So this queen, okay, this can represent that the complexes can rule our lives. Just as like the collective, norms. Well, that's what everybody says. Well, that's okay, but what do you say? You know, anybody pulls that on you? Well, such and such said something, you know, that kind of false intimacy. Somebody's going to tell you what somebody else said. The first thing you do to stop that right in its track is ask the person who's delivering this message, is that what you feel too? Just in case. All right. So psychologically, kings and queens represent the dominant opinions and the principles in the personal life and the highest religious and political and scientific concepts and their ideas and principles which to live by. Not to mention the height of wealth and power and beauty and the envied object of the beloved people, okay? And surely it's treason if we betray these principles, the king or the queen. They have absolute authority, or at the very least, we will be exiled, if not beheaded. So when we look at the king or the queen within, that can be a dominant principle. It can be a complex, all right? We could have a positive mother complex or a negative mother complex. It can be cold and unfeeling, or it can be very warm and loving. I mean, that's the triple goddess. This is an initiation. about the Mother Virgin crone. Or in the Greek version, it would also be Demeter, Persephone, and Hecate, for those of you that are into the Greek things, okay? So, but our queen, our nameless queen, is alone, without her king or her husband. So she's one dominant figure without opposition or a counterpart, which is always, we start to look for that. What is going on here? She's alone. What else is around her? Where is the tension of the opposite going to come from? Because there's not going to be a story unless we have some tension here. So in fairy tales, this condition represents needing renewal. The soul needs continual renewal. That's why we get into mischief we get into. That's why we have conflicts. We have to have it because that is the soul's way, through the tension of the opposite, through the conflict. A third factor, a resolution, is going to happen, or it will just go back into the unconscious if we repress it and show up as a body symptom. So this scene is just in the middle of the cold, so we know it's the solstice. We know it's got to go into the inner world, okay? And that this ruling principle, the queen, she's lonely, she's isolated, and she's without vitality or relatedness to her humanness, her feminine values. Now this can also, if we're looking at it as a teaching for a man's anima, which is his inner female, a man who has a lonely queen as an anima from his mother complex, he can often be in the world, he can be very kind and friendly and courteous, but they're usually not very creative. The mother complex just won't, the cold queen won't let that happen. So this scene feels pregnant with a sense of deep-seated crisis, which can lead to new possibilities. However, this kind of rigidity just as easily can be the barrenness of the heart and soul. So once again, things can always go either way. And there's nothing right or there's nothing wrong. We may have to do it 3 times or 10 times in order to get it. But just we sit there and feel that feeling. And as you're reading fairy tales or dreams, just try to take note of your fantasies or your imaginations or your comments. They're all revelatory. But in each of us, there is a lonely queen that looks out the window, that is framed in ebony, and imagines, we imagine ourselves in another position, whatever that might be. That's the nature of fantasy. We are image-making beings. That's what we do. We spend more time in images and imagination and fantasies, and fantasies are real. We're always creating images. That's what we do as human beings. So this lonely queen that's looking out the window, and she looks into the distance, and so imagine yourself, you're sitting there, a lonely queen, and that you're looking out this framed ebony, this black wood, okay, a natural material, black. Also starting to indicate Negredo. The Negredo is an aspect of the first in alchemy. Without some awareness of Negredo, we're not going to have an alchemical process. And alchemy is another language for individuation. So imagine yourself in this position and look into the distance and notice what happens to your soul. What are you feeling when you kind of just look and stare out the window? And then catch your thoughts, catch your fantasies. Because the window implies a view beyond our present limits. And dreams and fantasies are the true vital elements of psyche. So even though the queen is passive, although she is sewing, which is a big image, she's kind of, she's aware of some vital elements of the psyche, okay? Because if you cannot imagine yourself in another frame of life, nothing's going to happen. It starts with a fantasy. It starts with a hope. It starts with something. I have it happen all the time. I'll have an insight or a vision, something the soul wants to tell the person. And I'll say, it's funny you're saying that. It's like, yeah, it's hilarious. Okay. But I was thinking that. It's like, yes. Now, do something with it. Your psyche wants you to not just think and let it drop back into the unconscious and do nothing. Okay? See, we suffer not so much from the world as you are, but rather from our ideas about it. Ideas that we form from personal experience, what we expected of ourselves or others, or worse, what living the unlived life of our parents. And that happens so often in love. So often our definition and certainly our expectations are that of a young girl, a maiden, with no experience, and really wants those expectations. And when we don't want to mature, those expectations could get us in a lot of trouble. But we also need to accept the dark frame around our lives and the acceptance of limits. So what else for our people who are involved in astrology? The dark frame, that's Saturn. Through limitations. The frame, or it can be our frame of mind. But we already know, there's something that's going to happen here. Okay? So the Negredo, which is called the blackening, that's an alchemical term. And without the Negredo is like when we fall into a depression, or we fears, or dark, or mysterious. It's like I can't see my life. It doesn't move. It's just dark. We know. Wait a second. Psyche is trying to get us into a process. Most people will, seek me out when they realize, like, oh man, I need some answers here. This is getting way too dark. Okay. So now the queen is sewing, which is another incredible image. I mean, I can personally relate to sewing because I've always sewn since I was like 4 years old, and it's contemplative. Like you're sewing something, you're doing something, you're having a relationship. For me, it's very meditative. It calms down, and even if it's sewing on a button, the ritual of it. Okay, it connects me to just the feminine weaving. Okay, so this queen was sewing, which symbolically is woman's work. Now, don't get all uptight about that. Woman's work, it just means that the feminine we weave. When we're weaving, we're in the presence of the divine, the goddess. And the goddesses, they weave our fate. Okay, the queen is not just passive, but sewing indicates she's active. It's a small act. No matter how subtle, it's a simple task that sewing is. Sewing and needlework, or working with your hands, it's very contemplative, introspective, and often opens us up to the imagination, to fantasies and new longings, even if it's how beautiful your work will be when you're finished. So I find people have gotten away from sewing, and it's fun, and it's beautiful. See, because the heart has a story that only the hands can tell. And that starts what's happening when we're sewing. And it's actually the needle and sewing, it's all a very complex psychological image, okay? So the simple task, of sewing is kind of like a canvas of one's creativity or knitting or whatever one is doing, just the repetition. It's like a cadence. It's like your prayer beads, okay? So, and while we're doing this, let's see, it's like the small and like these ordinary steps and these stitches that help build our strength or relate to time in another way while fate weaves. But while doing this gentle task, the queen pricks her finger. Another like, whoa, okay. I don't know if anybody's ever pricked their finger, but that hurts, man. So it's indicating a small wound. And it's indicating that the situation is becoming critical. Here she is, lonely, looking out the window, isn't even aware of a fantasy, and she gets pricked, okay? The rude awakening. So this is indicating that the wound and the situation is becoming critical, as if something active has occurred in her. A prick of the finger wakes everyone up and often shocks us out of a fantasy state. The needle prick is a definite place, and that is perhaps it's in a place long forgotten, and the needle reminds you of a pain or a trauma or a painful incident when something pricks like that. And hands and fingers, they're so sensitive, not to mention palmistry, not to mention that each finger means something. We could go on forever, okay? So, and fingers represent, it implies the future when things happen to our fingers, all right? So you're just looking at all of this, and then 3 drops of blood fall to the ground. That's extraordinary. And according to ancient tradition, 3 is the active masculine number. So here, once again, there's a hint that life is not over. We have all had that special moment in life with a fateful significance, a mystical moment, when one can decide freely without the push from the outside world of the wouldas, couldas, and shouldas. And one knows that if we do not do this or that, or if we do this or that, our life is going to change. But unfortunately, most people let this moment pass by. I mean, even if you go through a day and think, I wonder what would happen if I would have gone left and not right. Life can be a series of missed opportunities where we tragically say, if only I had. So we're trying not to do that by seeing the depth and the meaning of life and Snow White and the Snow White within us. And so this blood, these 3 drops of blood. 3 is always the Trinity. And originally it's the triple goddess, Virgin Mother Crone. And the blood, this holy liquid, okay, a sign of sacrifice or of our deepest bonding. Blood is thicker than water, the blood bond of friendship, an oath that cannot be broken without grave repercussions. So, this is all the stuff that blood is made out of. Vampires, although this doesn't really have anything to do with vampires. So, just think of all the different sayings and axioms about blood and feel how that speaks to you. Because these fairy tales have lasted for thousands of years, okay? They have deep meaning. So the 3 drops of blood that they speak of the beginning of that life is going to begin to flow. And life must flow. So blood, which is life, in the snow, which is death. So again, we have this opposite, red and Snow White in the fairy tale. Snow is also is this innocence, and sometimes we can be dangerously innocent, and that's not good. But Snow White's going to find out about that one. Okay, so we get this sense that a new and almost unbearable drama begins, like when we fall in love or when new love announces itself, and the way to avoid conflict is to keep the opposites from developing. So if you let yourself get involved in the exchange or in the tension of the opposites or in the play of opposites, great energy will spring forth. If not, living or moving into life, it's soul death. Go for the conflict. Something's going to come out of it. Well, it's coming at you anyway. All right. So at this very moment, when the blood is spilled, the queen expresses her heart wish. If only I had a daughter. She specifically asked for a daughter. All right? That are the colors of alchemy, with her white skin, as snow, with her red lips and her ebony hair. So out of this cold scene, it seems so simple, something like in the depth of winter. It doesn't look like anything's happening, but there's a whole lot of stuff going on in the inner worlds. Okay? Or you even look at a tree and think, that tree's never going to blossom. And then, as the weather changes and spring opens up, suddenly we see these blossoms, these young, virginal blossoms come out of this ancient tree that looks like it's just going to dry up and fall over, but it doesn't. And that's what's so beautiful. So at this very moment, when her blood is spilt, she expresses her heart wish, if only I had. And there, the tale reveals the colors of alchemy. And these are the colors, the transformation of the soul, the three stages of alchemy that we go through. And alchemy is another language for individuation, which Jung was very, very interested in. Okay, so the negredo is the blackening, and so the blackening, once again, is the depression. I can't see. I'm so dull. I'm going to get onto the covers. I need to go into a dark room. Whatever that blackening may be. Okay. And then there's the stages of whiteness, which is the albino, and then redness, which is the rubio, are all alluded to a symbolic form. And then comes the birth of the divine child. Like, holy moly, where did this come from? I mean, we're talking immaculate conception. We're talking, the birth. We're moving from our passive and subtle, working with something, and all of a sudden, bam, the idea comes up, the vision comes up. And then the birth of the divine child and the daughter, and the queen dies. Wow. So that's how Snow White comes into the earth, through the Death Mother. And she's left for a year before we know what happens, but you're going to have to tune in next week to find out the rest. So here, this child, the wishes of the dream and the mirror image of the lonely queen, she's born. But it lets you know she's born with a destiny, as we all are. Now, in the original version, actually, it was the mother who was also the stepmother. But that was, so intense, Having the mother that wants to kill is symbolically is a bit much. So it evolved into the stepmother, one step removed. But So this is what happens. And here we are in this amazing story of female initiation, both in men and in women. And I got to run because I only got 30 seconds left. So tune in, write emails, go on my website, LlorraineNeithardt.com, call for appointments, 212-757-8914. But most of all, dream yourself into this. If you want to activate your imagination, all you need to say to yourself is, once upon a time. And then tell yourself the story or write it down. So here we have it. Snow White is about ready to begin her initiation rites. Talk to you next week. Bye.